Ever since the final shape, I've only been using Prismatic, but I revisited Void Titan, and this build that I created destroys literally everything in sight. Not only will you have so many shields to throw, you can constantly keep everything volatile and weakened while keeping yourself and your teammates really healthy in environments like a Grandmaster Nightfall. So if this sounds cool and you want to do this, make sure you stick to the end of the video, and without further ado, let's get straight into it. Now before we go any further, you will need two things: the second chance exotic gauntlets and collective obligation. Wait. Before you click off the video because you have bad RNG or you don't do a lot of raiding, I have used this build with Graviton Lance and it still works pretty well. But with Collective's Void Leech perk, it allows us to constantly suppress, weaken, and make our enemies volatile after we leech the debuffs. On top of that, the exotic trait allows us to reload our magazine for free whenever we get Devour or Void Overshields, and we constantly be getting those. And if you need a refresher on second chance, your shields can now stun barrier champions, they weaken on hit, and you get 2 charges of them. The shields already give us one thing to leech off of with collective obligation, and we'll have the rest of them in our subclass. Speaking of the subclass, let's get straight into it. Now starting off with the super, I really recommend Twilight Arsenal. Not only is it fun, but this super can apply weaken and volatile at the same time. If you want to be different, be my guest, but then it is not my build. For the class ability, I'm choosing Rally Barricade since it has the shortest cooldown. Pick whatever lift you like, and we're going to be choosing the Throwing Shield, as not choosing this will just make picking second chance pointless. For the grenade, we're going to be choosing the Suppressor Grenade so that we have suppression to leech off of. And man, will I tell you, leeching off suppression is probably the best Void debuff to use, since suppression will basically prevent any enemies from shooting. Now as I mentioned, if you don't have collective obligation and are using Graviton Lance, you can just use the Vortex Grenade or any other grenade that you like. Then for the first aspect, we're going to be choosing Controlled Demolition. Essentially, this makes it so that your Void abilities cause volatile, and every time a volatile thing explodes, it gives you and nearby allies a chunk of health. Honestly, this is a pretty goated aspect, and shooting these volatile targets with collective obligation gives it volatile rounds, and while you have these volatile rounds, you're healing constantly because they're exploding. Then for the next aspect, I'm choosing Offensive Bulwark, and honestly the only reason I'm picking this is because when you have a Void Overshield, your grenade recharges faster, and your melees have more range and damage. On top of that, any final blows with your melee restores a portion of your overshield and makes it last longer. And we get these Void Overshields from our Throwing Shield, and if we remember, getting a Void Overshield reloads our collective obligation automatically. Now for the first fragment I'm choosing is Echo of Persistence. This essentially makes our Void buffs last longer. In this build we're getting Devour and Overshields, and I'll tell you how we get Devour later in the video. Then we're going to be using Echo of Harvest, as defeating weakened targets create an Orb of Power and a Void Breach. Since our Throwing Shields weaken, and they can ricochet between everyone, we can defeat multiple weakened targets and have tons of Orbs of Power and Void Breaches. Not only that, but these Void Breaches help us get our melee energy back when using an artifact mod. That I'll tell you about later. Then for the third one, using Echo of Cessation. Now the finisher part is a bonus I guess, but the main thing that you want is defeating volatile targets also create a Void Breach. So now, adding on the last fragment and this fragment, you can have up to like 5 breaches at once because everything is weakened and volatile, and you can get a ton of melee energy from this. And to top it all off, Echo of Starvation makes it so that when we pick up Void Breaches or Orbs of Power, we gain Devour. Devour makes it so that we get grenade energy and a chunk of health back every time we kill someone. And since everything is weakened, we make it very easy to kill a lot of things, so we can constantly keep Devour up. We have a longer timer, and we get grenade, melee, and health back all at once. All of these abilities synergize beautifully together, and I'm not even done, because let's talk about the weapons and the mods. Now for the special weapon, I'm using Lost Signal because it's pretty good this season, but realistically you can use whatever you want. I already explained why I'm using Collective Obligation, but as I mentioned before, if you don't have this gun, Graviton Lance is a pretty good alternative. For the heavy weapon, any Void Heavy will do, but moving on to the mods, on the helmet I'm running a Harmonic Siphon and 2 Double Finders. Now this is especially good because exotic primaries require less final blows to get a heavy brick to drop, and what do you know, we're using one. For the arms, we're running a heavy-handed to make an orb on our empowered melee kills, and with this on top of the fragment we can get 2 orbs off 1 kill. An impact induction so that when we use our powered melee our grenade comes back faster on hits, and a fastball because I want to. For the chest, just to match it to the enemy. And for the legs, I would normally run a recuperation for the quality of life, but invigoration is nice to get our melee back even quicker from orbs and the breaches. And I have double void surges so that our collective does more damage. On the class item, we're using a reaper so that shortly after using my class ability, I get an orb after killing someone, an outreach so that when we pop our class ability, we get our melee back quicker, and then a time dilation so that our surges last longer. Now honestly, the artifact is the important part, as power from pain makes it so that final rapid blows against weakened targets give us devour, and supernova makes it so that picking up these void breaches cause your next source of void damage to create a weaken pulse. This makes it so that if you're using graviton lance, you have a pseudo collective obligation, as you can still apply weaken using your gun. But if you do have collective obligation, it's just a nice added touch. But lastly, the most important one is severed cold, where your void breaches now grant you melee energy. So now orbs and void breaches are giving us melee energy, and we are making a ton of them. But now that I've showed you how the build is set up, let me tell you how to play it. Now, unlike other exotic weapons, collective obligations does require some discipline on your abilities, as you want to be ready for when that void leech counter is gone, and if you don't have any abilities to throw to apply any of the void debuffs, you're basically just using a legendary pulse rifle. But one tip you can do with this gun is that while you have all these debuffs with collective, you can shoot a guy on the last second with all the debuffs on him, reload and do whatever, and you can leech off your own debuffs. But even so, keep track of your timer so that you have 100% uptime on this goated ass gun. But if you're not using collective and using graviton lance, you can basically ignore everything that I just said. Now, I would say the downside of Devour is in higher end content, things can be harder to kill and it will be harder to keep Devour proc. But with Controlled Demolition, you can essentially buy some time to kill that target and you'll have 15 whole seconds because of Echo of Persistence. Keep in mind, they're also going to be weakened, volatile, and suppressed, and you can keep the chain of void debuffs and buffs going essentially forever. And while you're doing all that, you're getting grenade energy back with Devour, you're getting melee energy back from the breaches and the orbs, and your weapon is doing more damage because of them being volatile and the weapon surges. Another thing to not forget is that your super also applies weaken and volatile, so if you're about to die, you can make someone volatile and you'll get your health back because of Controlled Demolition, and then it will most likely kill them making a void breach, and picking that up will give you Devour, meaning that you get a chunk of health back. And honestly, with this build, it allowed me to breeze through the Proving Grounds GM effortlessly, and if it allowed me to do that there, you can use this build anywhere. And with all that being said, you made it to the end of the video. If you enjoyed this build, consider liking and subscribing, as it helps me out a lot and you don't want to miss out on any other fun builds I'm going to be making in the future. Let me know if you made any adjustments to the build down in the comments below, or if we should resurrect King Von. And with all that being said, take care of yourselves, take care of each other. Peace and love, baby.